Welcome to another episode of Peers Over Beers, your favorite digital and social evangelist podcast, with your industry veteran hosts, Chris Detzel. This podcast starts now.
Thanks, everyone, for another Peers Over Beers. My name is Chris Detzel, and I do have another special guest, Jephtah Abu. Did I say that right, Jeff?
Yeah, you did. Jephtah Abu.
Abu. I'm
Sounds
sorry.
like
Abu.
a chant, yeah? Abu. Yes, exactly.
Abu.
Sounds
Okay.
like a chant. Yes.
Hey, I'll want to have you on again. So we'll definitely, and if you want to come on later, again, then we'll do it, and I'll make sure to say your name properly the first time. Or what I like to do actually is just say my name and then hand it off to you to let you say your name. That's easier. But
yeah,
go ahead.
I think we should have done that. But it's cool. It's Jephtah Abu. That's it. That's my name.
Let's do this.
Jephtah Abu.
So Jeff, let's do this. Let's start over. All right, ready? Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to another Peers Over Beers. My name is Chris Detzel, and
Jephtah Abu.
nice to meet you, Jephtah. Did I say that right?
Awesome. Yes, you did. I love the way you changed your tone. It makes it sound more mysterious, but yeah, I love it. Jephtah Abu. That's my name.
Well, welcome to a Peers Over Beers. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Yeah, I do.
Go
I
ahead.
don't think I have my beer over here, but I would definitely I think you have yours, but I'll definitely just vibe with you as well.
Well, it's 8 a.m. My time here in Dallas, Texas, and I have a coffee, and I've been drinking coffee all morning already. So I don't drink beer at 8 a.m. What time? Where are you located, and what time is it?
Yeah, I'm in Lagos, Nigeria. It's in Africa, and it's like 3:10 p.m. over here. So my day's about to round up.
Yeah, beer's probably, it's a little early, I think, for beer there too, right? I mean, it is Friday, so it's not unheard of, but that's really cool. It's funny because I think you reached out to me about, I don't know, it was a month ago or so, about being on Peers Over Beers. And I feel like it's probably been about 6 months though, that you just came on the scene of the community space, or at least, I started seeing you on LinkedIn, and, you've done a really good job of, socializing yourself and getting out there and, speaking and things like that. And, what's amazing to me is that you're fairly young in the community industry, but I mean, you've been kind of doing some of this for a while, but as a job, I think you're fairly young in that. But I think you've done an amazing job so far. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Whenever people always say that, I'm always like, wow, it's a humbling experience. And it just takes me back to the beginning. And something people don't know is that I'm very shy. Like, I'm the shyest person you ever meet. So it's crazy that I'm like all over the place talking, like being at events. And I realized that sometimes your passion overweighs like your character. So it's like, I'm too passionate about this to be too quiet. So I find myself like leaving my comfort zone daily. And I'm like, I always take a pause and be like, did I just do that? Did I just talk to that person? But it's like the passion keeps foiling me to like keep on going, keep on leaving my comfort zone. So yeah, it's fun as well, like meeting people, talking about what I believe in, and also teaching and also learning at the same time.
I love that. And sometimes I think, I think we all, to move our passion forward, to move our career forward, to do things that we've never done before is always a little scary. But you know what? I think that if you continue to do those kinds of things, you will just blossom into, stay out of your comfort zone a little bit, and you'll blossom to be something amazing for yourself. You know what I mean? And I think that, to me, that's important because, as I kind of look at it, as just a little story about me is, I grew up in a pretty tough, my parents did drugs and drank, were alcoholics. So not Peers Over Beers, I'm not an alcoholic, but, so I, I didn't grow up in a great home or a great environment, but, if you persevere, you focus, you kind of get out there, I think that you'll be okay. And I love that. I love that story. So um, I know today you wanted to talk a little bit about how you include and the inclusiveness of, community and things like that. Tell me a little bit more about that. I'm very excited to hear it.
Yeah. So in case everyone knows, or most people don't know, I'm very passionate about DIB. So DIB is basically diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I chose this part. Funny enough, I've been doing diversity, equity, and inclusion advocacy even before it was named, because I've worked with brands like from China, US, UK. So I've always noticed as a person of color, there was a special, or not, I won't use the word special, but there was a way I was treated compared to people from the US that I sort of internalized. And I realized that, okay, this wasn't right after a while. And I'm always talking about like, hey, I don't feel this is right. I remember I worked for one Chinese company, name withheld, obviously. And I told them that, okay, I feel like this is wrong because the ad they wanted to do was targeted towards Black Americans. And I'm like, I feel like this is offensive. And the person told me what I was saying didn't make sense. And I'm like, okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we got into a heated argument. And I'm like, bruh, this is not like right. And I always say I've always been advocating. Then I discovered, it was even recently I discovered that, oh, this is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Something I've been doing even when I was a child. Like when I see something that is wrong, I always want to speak up. And one of my favorite quotes ever is, if you stay silent in the middle of oppression, you have sided with the oppressor. So it's like there's no middle ground. It's either you are for or you are against. And I decided to be like against things I felt like were wrong. So in terms of community building, a lot of people try around the world, inclusion, diversity, equity. But the summary of everything is just treat humans fairly. Like if I could say, what is summary of diversity, equity, and inclusion? It's just about treating humans fairly. And by treating them fairly, you create a sense of belonging. And that's something that you can't sort of, there's no marketing strategy around it. It's either you work on it intentionally or you don't. Because you see, during the Black Lives Matter protests, when George Floyd was murdered, a lot of brands came out and said, we are Black Lives Matter pro. Like people changed their profile picture, people put black. But you could see that, a lot of people could see that, okay, so this was just a cheap like gimmick. Some brands that have been called out for racist comments were literally tweeting about Black Lives Matter. So you could tell it wasn't genuine. So let's refer that back to like community building. Like I've been in so many communities, and the truth about it is, I think there are reports to back this up. Most community managers come from the US. I think CMX report said about 70%. That was this year. Last year was 74%.
Yep.
So imagine like 30% from other countries. Let's say you have 20% from Canada. So you have only 10% left. And we are meant to share that between Africa, India, like different places. So you can imagine that there's no much visibility in the community space. So while community managers are like creating strategies around engagement, like foster conversation, they always have this mindset of let's do it to a certain type of people. And they forget that communities are not just one person. A group, I feel like I always say an active community is a community that has diverse folks inside, and these diverse folks are allowed to contribute and engage in ideas or programs in a way that they feel comfortable in. Because you might have a community, you might have one Black person in your community, or you might have one Asian, but that doesn't make you diverse. It just makes you, exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
It just makes you a community with one Black person.
Yeah.
Like, so, but when this person of color is allowed to like contribute to ideas, that is when there's diversity in your community. So it's like from the onset, from your onboarding strategy to the events, your panel list. For example, I've been part of a lot of communities where it's the same onboarding strategy. Like, okay, come on board, introduce yourself, where do you come from? And that is it. So it's like the same thing, but you giving people power, the ability to talk more about themselves is like true diversity. For example, which I don't know, I think 4th of July is a popular holiday in the US.
It is.
In Nigeria, we have Independence Day. We have a lot of days that are special to us. But most communities I've joined, there are no platforms to talk about your holidays. There's no platform to talk about the food in your country. There's no platform to even talk about yourself. It's just the basic, your name, where you are from, your hobbies. And it's a US thing because it's like most communities are heavily dominated by the US folks. So they are used to like having this sort of like onboarding strategy. So definitely conversations about themselves will come up. While me, I'm from Nigeria, all I can talk about is my name, where I'm from, and my hobbies. But there's so much that I've not spoken about. For example, my favorite food in Nigeria. There's so much music in Nigeria. So your onboarding strategy should cover all those things. Then obviously events. Like I always say, highlighting special events for people who have been marginalized is a good way. For example, we have Pride Month in the US. You have Black History Month, like these things, and giving people abilities to like celebrate these holidays in your community is also a good way. Like these are just some rough drafts that you can implement, because if you want to actually be diverse, it takes a lot of work, like actual work. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, or
You did.
we can talk about it further.
No, I've been thinking about what you said, and I think that when you go back to the kind of the Black Lives Matter and how folks kind of really, to some degrees, to them they were standing behind George Floyd, right? Like they didn't, they were against police brutality and all that stuff, but maybe it was just kind of a, I think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, because you have to probably live this more than I do, right? As Caucasian, I can't easily just, I can only listen more so than than give a direct opinion. But what it felt like to me was, yes, I think there was a lot of on the surface stuff. They just kind of want to look at, hey, Black Lives Matter, that's great, and that kind of stuff. But I did see, I think there was some positives about some of that, right? Like it one way or another, it brought a lot of light to, the police brutality within the USA. I mean, you started to see cops be, prosecuted and things. It's not enough. I'm not saying it is, but you're starting to see more and more of that. And unfortunately, it's not enough, and it's still happening in the US, but, change doesn't happen overnight. You know what I mean? And so I think there was some positive stuff, but you're right. I think that, some brands just did it. Just, hey, I want to get more exposure. I want to, that kind of stuff. And then when you start thinking about communities, like when I think about my community, it's, I don't want to give an excuse. I do feel like it's a little bit harder because when you think of the tech industry and things like that, I don't go out of my way I don't care what color somebody is. I just try to welcome people in however they are. And you're right. Some of that stuff that you're saying is, some of these tactics that people drive from, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? Okay, what do you do? That kind of stuff. I mean, it's very
the basic,
on the surface. Yeah. So I don't disagree with anything that you said. I mean, I think it's very interesting and very, and I like how you're kind of bringing this out. And the other piece is, I thought that for a long time when you said, most people that are community managers, for example, have been in the US. And that's been for a long time. And just say recently, it's probably the last 2 or 3, maybe 4 years, you started seeing community manager roles within, UK or a little bit in France or, and India, you're starting to see it now, but it hasn't been all that much, except for recently. You're starting to see it kind of take off, and you being kind of the first, and it feels like the first person I know in Africa. In Africa,
I tell you something?
It's huge.
Yeah.
Can
I tell you something funny? Not actually funny, but mind blowing. We have over 4,000 community managers in Nigeria, just Nigeria alone. So I think that's a lot. And it takes me back to why I even started being like so active in this space. We have over 4,000 community managers, but we have only like 10 or 15 that have global positions. And it's not even a matter of like talent or skills, because definitely these community managers have it. But in terms of like exposure and what companies are used to, because I called out a report earlier that there are community managers in Nigeria that rather than classify these community managers under others, because you have US, you have India, you have others. So others is like a survey you did, and community managers in Nigeria filled it, but they weren't enough. So you just classified them as others, which I felt the word was very wrong. And it still brings us back to like inclusive language. Because if a company sees this, they automatically think there are no community managers in Nigeria or even Africa. And I'm just telling you now, I'm sure you're learning, we have over 4,000. Like,
that's a lot.
And even more. That's it. So it's like, why are we not having the roles? I'm like the first person that I know of that is so active in this space. When it comes to community management, I think in Nigeria, devs rel is like the most popular. Like you can see a lot, but for actual community managers, you can't see people that have global positions. And it's changing. People are starting to get educated, like with programs like CMX Masterclass, C School, like Uncommon, like these communities, like you are seeing every day. I'm in CMX, it's a community for community managers. I see more and more Nigerians joining, and it's like I might have touched someone without even realizing it, like by being this active. So it's like we have the community managers, we have the talent. So it's like, how do we now get people to know that there are community managers in Nigeria that are talented? So that's when the issue now comes up. That's when we have these events, we have these programs, we have this like talks about, like, I'm sure, like if I tell anyone that 4,000 community managers, I'm like, wow, really? And that is just in one country in Africa. So imagine like Ghana, Togo, South Africa, or that I've met literally community managers from all around Africa. So it's just funny when I hear people say there are no community managers in Africa. I'm like, hey, we have over 4,000 in Nigeria.
We at least that's interesting, because that's not really well known, and maybe it's not well known in the US anyways, right? I think people like you, maybe it just takes somebody like you to start really kind of talking about it, getting out there, like on these podcasts that you're already doing, and then, like you said, I mean, CMX is just one place, but maybe there's places in Nigeria or others like CMS. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's an opportunity for, exposure on those kinds of things, because, what are these community managers doing? Is there tech companies that their community, is there, what? I don't even know. Like, what does a strategy look like for them? It's the same. I mean, if they're going to CMX, then, they have some of the same beliefs that we do on how to build a community, strategy, roadmap, all these things, engagement tactics that you do to get people engaged and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's like I realized that when I talk at events, talk at programs, people are always like, okay, do we have like a resource or a go-to book we can use to learn about DI? And I'm like, yeah, it's one thing to like implement steps, but it's another thing to be like intentional about it. I think someone said somewhere that even if you are passionate about DI, if like C-level or management is not, you are just running around in circles, because they literally will not see the importance of it and you end up being blocked. So it's like, I'm even like, heads up, I'm even working on a resource like for community managers who are interested in implementing like diverse and inclusive strategies in their community, because I feel like it's important. So we have events, you have programs, you have inclusive language, you have literally a lot of things, and it's a lot of work. That's why you cannot fake it. Like you cannot fake it. It's like I said, it will show if it's genuine. So I think it just brings us back to like, what is the goal, or why are you interested in DI? I think that's why I always ask people whenever they come, because the first step is like, as a Caucasian, acknowledging that we all have biases. Even me, so if I have bias, like there are some things I see. But how do you like have control the bias? Not really control, but how do you put it in such a way that it doesn't affect your judgment towards people? So it's like I always say, acknowledge you are in a place of privilege as a Caucasian, as a person of color. If I come to America, there are definitely some things that I'll experience that you would not experience. And these people that are Caucasians in America, they're in a place of power. And it falls back to everything. Literally, I can fall it back to community. Like majority of the communities I've joined, I feel like I've not seen any person of color. Like no shade to anyone. They have awesome communities, but I've not seen one person of color that is a community manager. And these are big communities. So the community space is like heavily dominated by people from the US. And I can't blame them because obviously community started like blowing up from the US before it started like pointing out to other countries. But all I'm saying is that also give people from like people of color and people that are marginalized opportunities to also tell their story.
It's a good point because as you kind of bring that up, I'm like, who do I know of color that are community leaders here in the US? Marjorie Anderson. That's the only person that
Shanna
comes to my mind.
Summers. I know like a lot. Shanna, Marjorie, Ronald, Victoria, Ashley. Like these are people like I just started being
Ashley.
active.
Yep.
And
Yeah, I know who she is.
they're less than 10. Yeah, they're less than 10. And it's like, okay. But if you mention people that are Caucasian, the list will go on. I literally wrote a book. I don't know if you saw it, a book on like builders guides for community managers that has all the resources you need. And as I was compiling the list, I could see the difference. Like we have over like 30 community managers that are Caucasian, and we have only like 6 that are of color. So it sort of shows you.
I have to tell you a story, and I think this is relevant to our conversation. Is like when I look at, so I live in Dallas and we have communities of runners and everything else. And I own this one group called Dallas DFW Running Group. I think there's like 3,500 people and things like that. And there's this one guy, he always posts about, some of his running experiences. He's African-American. And, he's part of this other running group because mine's just more of a Facebook group, and we don't meet or anything like that. It's just kind of try to inspire each other. But I was looking at the group that he actually goes run with, and it's rare, to see just a whole group of African-American runners. Like I would say 90% of it, and there's like 40 or 50 of them getting together, running together. And I was like, wow, the groups that I'm part of, yes, there's all different colors, but it's predominantly Caucasian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought, so I thought that might have been relevant to, I was thinking about that because I knew we had this call coming up, and I thought, how can I do a better job specifically in that group, to promote diversity, inclusion, and things like that, because I just post running stuff, and I don't care who comes in, right? But I probably could do a better job of promoting these people that are of color and things like that to see their experiences and stuff like that. And I'm sure I don't do enough, and I'm not sure of a strategy on how to do that in my own, B2B community that I run at Reltio. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's definitely piqued my interest, and probably will read that resource to get that better for me.
Yeah, it will be out. It would definitely be out next month, so early, like May, June, early June. And when you're talking, it made me think of a common misconception everyone has about DI. Like especially in the US, once you mention DI, is looked at in race, like racial identity and ethnicity. Like, okay, DI in the workspace. But as I'm on this journey and I'm talking to people, I realize that diversity means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's diversity of thoughts, there's diversity of sexual orientation, mental and physical capabilities, like literally everything. You can talk to like 5 people from 5 different countries and they'll tell you 5 different things about diversity. And that's okay because everyone has their view of diversity as long as it's not harmful to the cause. And I think acknowledging that is like one of the biggest things I had to do. Because in Nigeria, diversity is like governed by culture and tradition. Like we're a very traditional country. Like like I mentioned my name. Like we have deep-rooted name meanings, like culture, everything. But we ignore other spectrums of diversity in terms of like sexual orientation, in terms of like gender, like every other thing. And that's just one spectrum view. But as I wanted to learn more about diversity, I had to leave like what I know and unlearn it and learn what diversity means to a lot of people. And you literally listen to different discussions about it. And I always say that's actually true diversity because it can't mean the same to every people, or it can't mean the same to like everybody in the same space. And it's just a common misconception. I always try and correct that. When we say DEI, it doesn't just cover race. It covers more than race. It covers opinions. It covers ideas, sexual orientation, ethnicity, mental, physical capability, like literally a lot. And people are like, okay, how do you balance it? Like, how do you focus on one? You can't just focus on one if you are DI. Like, it's just saying, okay, this cake, but instead of sharing, I'm going to take only this part and the rest, you can have it. Instead of sharing the cake equally, you're taking only one part and giving people when there's a full cake to share. So it's like acknowledging that it's so much more and focusing on it as a full spectrum is like key. Because you cannot even cover it if you say, okay, I want to be diverse and go across all spectrum. But acknowledging like, okay, we have a person of color in our community, or we have someone that's neurodiversity in our community, like inclusive language. How do we create it for people that have like mental and physical deficiencies or like things like this? It's like key because people just do, okay, it's race, people of color enter our community. There's a checklist, and it's so easy to checklist. Yeah, like we have one person in Africa checklist. We have one person that's African American checklist. But you have literally, I always said, you have literally just done nothing. It's just you're just a community that has an African, a community that has an African American. You're not diverse.
Yeah, you got me thinking, and I think that it feels hard to do. One, especially when I think about my digital community, like I don't always have conversations specifically with a person that posts a question into the community, regardless of their color or whatever. And if I do see that, maybe they are from another country or from, African descent or something, oh, that's interesting, but I'm not calling them to get to know them. I'm not, so I think it's a challenge when you think of if all you have is this digital community, which, I do have webinars and we do speak, but it's not like one-on-one. You can't have a one-on-one conversation with thousands of people, in your community. But I think you can be cognizant of that. And I think maybe I don't know what I don't know, but I'm thinking that, having conversations like this could help, somebody like me, think about, how am I engaging? How am I interacting? How am I, making sure they're included in different, aspects of the community itself, right? I think that's so intriguing, especially your resource thing that's coming out. That you've got me intrigued, my friend. So
yeah, it's like you don't realize, like in the community space. I think recently the truth about it is that community management just started becoming like a thing in the last 4 and 3 years. And it's like I've been in tech for like 6 years, and even in tech, it's heavily dominated by Caucasians, like heavily dominated. True. So there was a need for diversity, to present.
I don't disagree with that.
Voices.
I mean,
there's a big need.
We even at Realtio and every other tech company I've been at, trying to get more diversity in it has to be an effort. You have to think differently now, because if you don't, you'll just hire the same people that look like you. You know what I mean? And you don't even think. I mean, like if you think about the NFL today, for example, and most of the coaches are Caucasian, but most of the players are African American, right? Like if you and owners for sure, for sure.
NBA is like one of the biggest ones I've seen. Like
NBA is one. So but you are starting to see that come out slowly but surely. But they're having to put an effort into saying now. Every single team must have, I don't know if it's an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator that's African American. Period. You know what I mean? Or some kind of. But they're putting those efforts in there because there's not enough, and it's obvious, right? You look at the tech space, especially, lots of Caucasians there, and not enough African Americans, women, even women. And that kind of stuff, you just don't see it. Even us, we've had to make an effort to start saying, okay, X% is not enough. You know what I mean? And so we have to, and we call it out now, and so, you are slowly but surely seeing it move up, but it's not fast enough, and it could be maybe, and I'm not sure, is there enough African Americans or women in the tech space that can be more technical and things like that? I think they're starting to be. I think they're, and so we have to go after that, So I don't disagree.
And it is it's so amazing because it's like people of color and women are like taking it upon themselves to be vocal. It's like we're not waiting again. Like, okay, we want to like be vocal. So they're creating initiatives like women in tech, women who code, and these women are giving other women the opportunities.
Yeah.
Because it would have been different if it was like a white man that was in charge of women who code. You probably like literally it'll be filled with like white women. But you see that all these organizations are usually like governed by women of color. In terms of DEI, it's something that you see, like check it out. People that are like advocates for DEI, most of them are usually people of color. They're usually like marginalized people in the LGBT community, because they have taken upon themselves and they know what it feels like to be like segregated or marginalized. So they're like, I don't want this for anyone. Like, I want to be better. And it's the same with me. Like, if I'm telling my story because I've experienced this, it's different if I was telling it based on hearsay. And I've spoken to people, like my days are always filled talking to people of color, people that are in the US. So I'm able to get a glimpse of this is what you go through. Like in the community space, there are some conversations as a Black person I cannot have, because it's like, you will not understand if you have not walked in my shoes. But if I meet another person in Nigeria, I can try to talk to you about it. So when you have like these certain strategies in place, imagine like having a sub-community for African Americans. Definitely, human beings naturally gravitate to people they are used to or what they are familiar with. So if you come to a setting or a party and you see a white person and is the only white person there, automatically your mind will go to that person and you literally go there because you are familiar with it. And it's difficult to like go out of your comfort zone. And the same with community. Like if I'm a person of color, if I'm a Black person and I join a community and I see only one Nigerian, I'll go to that Nigerian.
Yeah.
It's like in the community strategy, how do you create it in such a way that even when the person goes to that Nigerian person, two of them or the group can still share with like the major community? And that's when subgroups come up, like subgroups for women, subgroup for people of color, people of the LGBT community. And it's like I think that's a quick tip that anyone can even take right now.
That's a good point.
Just having subgroups when you have enough members and engaging them in conversations.
No, it's such a good point. I think you're right. I mean, it feels like, or for the most part, those people that are creating those groups, like, coding for women, or women that now code and they want to teach other women how to code. And those kind of movements are most likely not going to be Chris Detzel trying to teach women how to code. Not to say you can't have men or whatever teaching women how to code, because I mean, that's part of it, but somebody's got to lead that movement. And it would be kind of weird for a man to lead that movement in a sense, right? And same thing.
It used to be so weird because he will not have he has no experience what it feels like to be a woman who has been like told, okay, you can't do this because you're a woman. So it's that, I think that's what drives like people that are passionate about DI. There's this like energy or there's this, I call it inner energy or inner like spirit of when you have been in that space and you're like, I don't want anybody else to experience it. So it fuels you to like become active. I mentioned before in this interview, like when you started, that I'm the shyest person you ever meet. But here I am talking about with you, talking like I'm literally on stage every day. And it's because I know how it feels like to be a community manager in Nigeria. So I want other community managers to like get that opportunity. So I have to like come out of my comfort zone every day. I have to like do more to like have these conversations, because I'm sure like you literally just learned right now that we have 4,000 community managers in Nigeria. Imagine like talking about this on all your platforms. Someone somewhere will hear, I'm like, okay, we want to hire community managers. What about Nigeria? Jeff mentioned it. And that's why these kind of conversations are very important.
I agree. I love these conversations, and I'm intrigued, and I have a lot to learn, and I appreciate you bringing this to the forefront, man. I mean, you're leading the movement, or at least trying to lead the movement, right? To let people know Nigerians. There's tons of community managers out there. There's it's not just you. So,
Yeah, I'm not the only one.
yeah, but like as I kind of think about it, so that to me is you're mentioning a report earlier around, hey, 70% of the people today that are community managers are in the US, and that means 30% are elsewhere, and you can imagine Nigeria, they probably weren't even thinking about that, you know what I mean? Or maybe there's a 0.5% of whatever they were thinking, and the rest are in Europe or something like that, or UK. And I think I saw that report. I can't remember, um, but there's 4,000. So, if there's 4,000, that means, I mean, how many are actually in the US? So I
Yeah,
don't think they were counting that number um, of community managers, leaders, and things like that. So this has been super intriguing, and I appreciate you coming on today and bringing this up. Anything else kind of on your mind, or you
I
said a lot,
feel
man? And
like
by the way, your passion is amazing. I love it. I love it's more than passion. It feels like it's a love. It's you gotta get it out there. Like you're just telling people, like and I love that about you and I think that's what it takes. It's also hard. It's going to be about consistency and continuing to tell that story and continue to get out there. You're doing a lot of things right now. If you're doing it from a year from now, because that's the hard part is to continuously do something over and over to get that word out. And you are making a difference, and I mean, I'm seeing it. You're on here and, and you're on other podcasts and you're speaking in other places and getting the word out there. So, good for you, man. I mean, that's, and for somebody that's shy and not, used to doing something like this, you're out of your comfort zone. But I think we talked about this earlier. I don't know if it was on the show or the pre-show, but you got to push yourself. Whether it's in business, whether it's some cause that you're focused on within the community. This has been inspiring to me, man. It's not something that I'm really, I don't think about it a ton. To be honest, I mean, I have thought about it, but I don't really take action, to be honest, and I need to. You know.
yeah. There's a book I think is I've forgotten. It's like why white people don't think about is it racial issue or something like that. It's like I learned that everyone has a bubble, like everyone is in a bubble. For
Yeah, that's
example,
right.
if you grow up in a white only state, you probably not know so much about like African Americans, but that's not an excuse. Like I call it
I agree.
weaponized ignorance. Like I don't know should never be the end of a conversation. It should always be the beginning of one. I don't know. And what do you do next? Like how do I become more learned? How do I go out of my way? And like you said, it's not everyone that wants to make the efforts. Like people love their comfort zone. Like it's not easy.
Yep.
And nothing grows in that your comfort zone. You just become comfortable. But if you go out, and that's the biggest risk, like leaving what you are used to talk about what you're passionate about or learn more things is like it makes you a bigger person or a better person. So yeah, I'll just end with I don't know should never be the end of a conversation. It should always be the beginning of one.
I like that. It's funny because I say that all the time. Is I grew up in a town called Little Elm, Texas. So it's a really small town in Texas, and I was raised very kind of. We didn't travel anywhere. We didn't do anything, and so I was very much in this bubble, like you mentioned. And then finally, I kind of got out of that bubble, not completely, but I get to travel all around the world and get to meet a lot of different people, and I realized I was in my early 30s then. Um, there's a whole new world. There's a whole world out there that, it's not always, my religion isn't necessarily the religion, or my thinking shouldn't just be that thinking. You know what I mean? Like people think in different ways and they have their traditions, they have their rituals, and it's different, but what I notice about people in general is we all like to have beers and hang out and talk and do cool shit. You know what I mean? Like it's just,
Yeah,
that's, we'd love to have a beer with you one day if, I'm out there or you're here, or, if we get to go to a conference together or whatever and just shoot the shit. You know what I mean? Like that's really to me what I've learned about people in general is we all have issues. We all have good things going on in our lives, bad things, all these things. But we're still human and we still want to talk and hang out. You know what I mean? And it does to me, I don't care who you are. I would love to hang out. You know what I mean? But the bubble is real. The bubble is real. And until you get out of that, you can't think differently. You don't allow yourself to think differently. And,
Yeah, and it even affects your work too, because it's like if you have a particular bias, I think this is in psychology, it's called the Pygmalion effect. So it means that if you have like a predetermined idea about someone,
yep.
you have an action towards that person, and that action towards that person, the person reacts in such a way that sort of reaffirm your action. So like a perfect example is if, for example, you remind me of a bully I had in high school, I would treat you like with disdain, or with like, I won't treat you nicely, basically. And in turn, you will obviously not treat me nicely. Like you would not react to me like a positive way, because you'll be like, hey, why does this dude hate me so much? And by you not treating me nicely, in my mind, I'll be like, yes, he's that kind of person. But it's my idea of you that made you treat me that way. So it's like having, even in community space, like having that neutral, which is not easy, like having a neutral ideology or neutral stance against things can help out a lot.
Absolutely. Well, Jephtah, this has been awesome, dude. This has been really eye-opening to me, and I love your point of view about diversity, inclusion, and not something that we really talk about too much. And having your perspective has been extremely helpful and extremely eye-opening to me. And I appreciate you coming on. I mean, we'll have to do this again if you want, and maybe talk more about it and see how your things, your resource thing is going. Talk more about that, if you want, and if you're open. But thanks everyone for coming to another Peers Over Beers. I'm Chris Detzel and
Jephtah Abu.
Thank you, sir.